Hello, everybody. What am I waiting for there? I'm looking at the screen, wondering when I'm going to come on. I'm looking at questions here. It says here, one question is, if I can see it all. Um, Many in the public service would say private consultants come in, they make a report, and then they're gone. And what could be done about that? Well, it depends, of course, on what the consultants are making the report on. But normally, outside consultants coming in, which would be management consultants, they make recommendations. And it's up to the permanent management, if you like, to follow through on those recommendations. Apparently, the questionnaire here is saying that they don't. Well, with me, normally a consultant makes suggestions, and there's a little bit of either confusion, resentment as to who will implement it from the permanent staff. I will remove that by bringing in change management consultants who spend a particular length of time making sure that the change is brought about, that it's implemented, that it becomes part of the daily operational work practice. And then their contract time is up and they are gone, and we have operation as we should have it, opposed to what was there before the original consultant's report came in. This is done all over private industry to prevent the animosity between permanent staff. Maybe that's why these things never get off the ground on permanent staff, and maybe it's that over familiarity. But I would really remove all that. I know how to do it, and I would make sure it's done. What am I looking at here now? I have another question in here. How can one independent make a difference without selling his or her soul for a seat at the table? Well, it's not about a seat at the table, let me say. It's about me presenting my thoughts, manifesto, if you like, to the people of the constituency of Longford Westmeath. The people, let's assume the people say to me, okay, we give you the vote and I go into the Dáil. With my vote counting, that's all I'm interested in, getting what I promised the constituents that I would do done. If someone offers me a seat at the table in return for supporting them on a give and take basis, that's a situation that I would have to look at. I would have a list of priorities that I will be explaining to the people of Longford Westmeath before the vote. If I'm getting my priorities in over the lifetime of the government, then certainly once you start to decide to be working with government, then you don't let anyone down. You don't stab anyone in the back. You go ahead true to your word. But that word is established at the start. And in the establishment of that word is what I want. And if I'm not getting what I want, then I'm not sitting at the table and I'm in opposition. And strangely enough, that's a problem we have at the moment. Excuse me. We've got Fianna Fáil in a particular place in government at the moment. They're neither government nor opposition. People can see now the mistake that they made at the start. Micheál Martin's party are nowhere. We're having to hear anything from an opposition point of view coming from the left party, the Provisional Sinn Féin. And most of what they say, if not all of what they say, is that hardline left socialist that will destroy this country. Well, Micheál Martin has found himself into the shadows now. Now, Fianna Fáil were punished, and rightly so, for what they did, or more importantly, what they didn't do. And maybe the electorate will continue to punish them at the end. He has fragmented his party on this. And that can happen to the smaller party when he's in that kind of a semi-coalition state with no real say. And that's what he has done. And Varadkar coddled him into that, in my opinion. But that wouldn't happen with me. I'm too long in the tooth. I'm not worried about my notoriety, if you like, or my popularity. What I promised the people of Longford Westmeath is exactly what I go after. If I go after anything else, I'm lying to them, and I'm not doing that. If I'm asked to compromise, that would be considered only in a time frame. In other words, we'll get to that, Donald, before we leave government. Then that would be fine, as long as I have that. And I'm preparing for it. That would be my situation. I wouldn't change from that. So I hope that answers the question. You can come back to me later at any time, really. Twitter, Facebook, and I'll answer you during the week, whatever, apart from my EMA. I see here, why are you getting into politics and what makes you stand out from the rest? That's from Rachel. Okay. Why am I getting into politics? I've always had an interest. Is there an Irish person alive that doesn't have an interest in politics? Okay, that said, the unwritten rules of how we live in a society and how we rule ourselves through the economic process, to put it in a kind of a local vernacular type of thing, you snooze, you lose. They're the rules. You try and make it, you try and make a company, you try to make success, and you fail, okay, you pay the price. If your company is successful, then you get the gain. Now, that used to be the way all my life, up to 2008, when it affected the money moguls, where the rule had to be adhered to by them. And again, I make reference to the government we had in power at that time. The country was going into the sea and the Green Party were in bed. Fianna Fáil were lost at sea. They didn't really know what to do. They were knocking on doors, economists all over the place. And that was because they were asleep for the previous 14 years. They had no regulation coming from central bank. The regulator, I don't know where he was. And more importantly for me, there wasn't one compliance officer taken up and asked questions over this. How come these things were allowed to happen on your watch? You are supposed to be the secretaries of these banks, these companies here. They weren't called in. Now, when you asked me why I wanted to get in, I made my mind up there and then that I was going to try and do something about this. And I guarantee you that that is something I will do if I'm elected in there. I don't agree with bank debt being transferred over to our sovereign debt. I'd stop it tomorrow. If I had the power tomorrow, I'd knock it on the head. You ask me why I get in there. This is why I'm getting in. Basically, to put things back right again, because I firmly believe that unless we're all operating under the one ideology, we're at nothing. We're fighting one another. I also want to see more respect coming from government, regardless of who they are, for the citizens of the nation. Now, the Irish citizens, okay, a lot of old griping and fighting and up and downs, but generally speaking, I like the Irish society. I like the way they go on. Tourists love Irish people. That's why they come here. Keep your cycleways and your lovely scenery. It's great. But that's all over the world. How do I know that? I've worked all over the world. There's magnificent scenery in the Alps. Why doesn't everyone go there? Tourists come to Ireland for the Irish people. I want to make sure that the Irish people realise that, just from that little aspect alone. And they send the tourists back home out into the world as ambassadors for Ireland. They've had such a time here that they're going out as ambassadors for Ireland. There's any amount of reason I can give you for why I want to get into politics. I want to see fairness. I have suggested in one of my first videos, housing is, I see some people thinking that it should be a right. I don't believe so. I believe you have to pay for it. But I believe that there's a better way to pay for it. You have to work in conjunction with your state. And I suggest that. And I'm saying people in old age pensions, they start getting this money when they're too old to enjoy it. I'm saying bring it into play now. I will work to give you 15 years of your old age pension and you're 20 years of age now. If you're there with your girlfriend, your partner, be any combination, two together is 300,000 towards a house now. No more bended knee to the county councillor. Give me your vote and I'll get you a house. No more of that. The system now says, there's the money, pay it back interest free over your lifetime. You buy your own house. And you have, and this is something that I would, one of the things that I would insist on for any support of any government, that this money is handed over with no strings attached. You sit in your new house valued at 300,000 euros and you've got 300,000 euros of equity in your house. And that leads into what you might do with that. And you will take advice on that, of course. But it also brings back the situation about your investment, your money, to your door. And that's outside of the control of these banks. You know, Rothschild all those years ago. Give me control of the nation's money and I don't care what laws they make. You know, that mantra, that banking mantra for me is what needs to be gotten rid of. Now I'm a firm believer in, and we'll have our arguments, I'm a firm believer in capitalism, but capitalism is about sustainability, which means that something has to be right. It must be making a profit. Now, everyone, when I say profit, everybody talks money. No, profit is an acceptance. It's only measured in money, but it's an acceptance of what you're offering, be it a service or a product. The public are buying it. They are saying, yes, I want that. The money end of it is just an indication of how much they're doing it. Now, you know, you'll hear people saying, oh, the union's got this, that and the other down the years. Sustainability, keep that at the front of your mind. You're getting now the way I will think and I will act on your behalf. Sustainability is what's important. No jumping on bandwagons from the point of view of tax breaks, grants, special interest allowances for companies, for different companies. And you have kind of certain politicians turning into lobbyists for other companies. It's not right. It's not giving everyone a fair crack at a whip. And that's why I want to get into politics. Maybe that's 10% of why I want to get into politics. But I hope I'm answering the question now. Now, there's another part to that question. It says, what makes me different from the rest? And the answer to that is not difficult. What makes me different from the rest is your opinion of me after hearing what I talk about. Simple. I only make a difference in your mind. I'm trying to make the difference necessary for you to say, well, hold on now. Let's look at what he's talking about. And all I ask you from at any time when I say anything to you, all I'm asking you to do is think about what I'm saying, give it a fair time, put it into a fair time frame for it, Put all the pros and cons to it that you consider. Don't come at it with confirmation bias. Now, what I mean by that is that only what you want to hear gets into your head. Anything else is kept outside. We all suffer from that. I suffer from that as well. You can't be passionate about something and not suffer from it. But when you get reminded of it, and you must remind yourself of it through a little thought process, you must give what people say a chance in your own mind to develop. Develop the pros and cons of the argument. You can have good debate, good discussion around the facts, not around opinion. Now, opinion has to be listened to when it's backed up with an academic achievement and a reasonable amount of experience. Other than that, opinion is okay for conversation. Everyone is entitled to it. But what they're not entitled to do is express it as a form of fact. You understand? And that gives you another insight to how I think and how I operate. But the difference I make has to be what you consider me to be. And I hope that answers the question. No one else. You take charge. Under me, doing things, if the world was doing what I want to do tomorrow, people would be deciding. And remember, all the decisions you see every day of the week, at every level of government or company, private company, are made by one individual. And then he or she convinces others. So, when you hear, the department said this, or the HSE said that, and that, that's giving you, I won't use the word now, but it's not true. Person makes the decision. And then their influence carries with the rest. If not, they convince the rest. Or another person who had another decision comes stronger, and their decision is the predominant one. And that gives you some insight to the way I operate. Over the coming weeks and months now to the election, we'll talk more about this thing, and you can form more questions for me based on what I say. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Let me. I see here a question. What's my opinion on reducing the age to vote from 18 to 16? Okay. I can't be anything other than truly straight with you on this. Having lived my life, I know that when I went to college and I came home after 2 years, I was amazed at what my mother and father had learned in those 2 years. Right? At 18, at 16, you're thinking differently. And rightly so. You're worried about education, you're thinking of learning, all that. And that's great. And there are issues that you might have that you might want to talk to your parents about. Moving the age off 18 down to 16, I would say no. Now, to all 16-year-olds, I suppose it's not going to make a bit of difference to me now because you may not have voted for me in the first place. So it won't make a difference now. You won't be 16 and vote. I don't know. Aside from that, I think that the more 18 is a reasonable age, because at 18 you can do lots of other things, and also in different countries, 18 is an age where you become the man or the woman that takes charge of their lives and stuff. But 18 here, we're looking for you to continue into third level education, and then you start to learn more, and maybe you start to take a different view of life, and your vote might change. So it's in that period of time where you're moving from opinion-based to fact-based, and in those 2 years you're looking for a vote. And I would say erring on the side of caution. I would say no, stay at 18. It's time enough anyway. Don't worry about it. I have another question here. It says, what I mean by nothing in isolation. That's the mantra for my push at this election. Everything we do, I could give you scenarios, but everything we do affects other people, other situations. We can see, and what we need to look for is the unseen at the moment. Good economists always look for that unforeseen consequence of the now action. Just as an example, it's a small example, but it might make you think, a thug on the street breaks a window, the butcher's window, and the butcher has to go and fix the window or call in the glazier, and that's more work for the glazier, and everyone is saying, what's wrong? And there's an insurance policy there, but no one is seeing that the butcher may have wanted to buy something else with the money that he's going to have to pay in extra premiums now, and he can't. And that means, let's just say, for the purpose of the discussion, that he wanted to buy a pair of shoes, and now he can't buy the shoes, which means that the person making the shoes has no sale. Therefore, people get laid off. Everything, and that's just a small example of how that unforeseen consequential domino affects everyone else. It's something that we all have to be conscious of. Let me give you another example of what we should be talking about that's in our faces every day of the week, and we don't talk about. You'd be talking about it when you talk to me, and I'd be talking to you about it. I'd be making you aware of it. Every time the government spend money, it costs someone a job somewhere in the private sector. Government have only two ways of getting the money. They can take it off you in taxes, or they can borrow it. And to borrow it, you have to repay it. No one else. They're standing into the middle. Insidious, really. No one stands alone. Their ideology is two people talking about a third person's problem, taking money from a fourth person to pay for it. Money out of your pocket that you can't put your hand into your pocket and take and go and buy whatever you decide to buy. Your choice is taken away from you. That's an unforeseen consequence of somebody. I'll give you an example. At the moment, there's a big shout about the new health system, the Sláintecare. I read it, and it sounds great until you come to the part about funding. And then it's like you have to run around with an upside down umbrella trying to catch money coming from heaven. And they talk in great aplomb about this. But there's nobody to ask, and nobody's saying where they're getting the money for. There's nobody saying that you're going to have to stop buying. And the shops today are under enough pressure. Retail is under enough pressure because of what's happening on the internet and the ability of people to go on and buy from anywhere in the world. And there's that, and you not being able to put your hand in your pocket because the government had his hand in there already. These are the unforeseen things that people are just not realising. Do you get me? An example, we've had problems with the water, Irish water. I ask people, what do you think of the health service? Oh, it's terrible. And the housing situation. Twitter, my Facebook, is full of complaints about, it's in a national crisis. Yet we have thousands of people marching to give the people who are causing these problems in health and housing, giving them the authority for Irish water. Now, that confuses me a small bit. I know it's easier to say, a psychologist will tell you, it's easier to say the glass is half empty than say the glass is half full. And by that I mean it's easier, for some reason, it's easier to talk negative than talk positive. So you end up talking positively about the negative, which is easier to say than talk positively about the positive. That's who humans are. But I want you to start thinking that little bit different. The future is going to cost a lot of money. We have difficulties here. We can't get broadband into the country. Can you believe that? There's a big hullabaloo about getting broadband. Do you know how much it's going to cost to put broadband into the country in 20 years' time? It's the same with our energy. We're not preparing properly. Now, I don't mind, if you think about what I said about your housing and you have this money in equity in your house, and we're looking for money to put in the electricity on our western seaboard, on the turbines, and anchored to the bottom of those turbines, I have energy wave units. All that costs money. Public-private partnership for that, with the population of the country putting up their lot as the private side of things. No longer are we going to have rich people borrowing money against the strength of government guarantee to make these things happen. Anyone can do that, but not anyone is getting offered that. I want to make sure that you start getting offered that. Take responsibility, a small bit of responsibility. It's all about payment. But once we're willing, we can make the payments. You hear government talking now about fiscal space. What I'm saying, if we want to talk about fiscal space, let's talk about it. Let's look at putting our money there, but our money. Not taking your money now to give to banks, to give back to you. Since 2008, between the central banks of Japan, the United States and EU, in excess of $33 billion has been spent on programs, quantitative easing programs. What we got was, this is to make sure industry keeps working. But that money went into the banks. They got it for nothing. They paid off existing debt. And now they're going to lend those out again with our money. Allied Irish, we own at the moment, most of it. They flogged off a bit of it there a couple of years ago. This is our bank. Think about this now. This is our bank going through the normal banking operations. We can get into that some other time. And they're making money. And then they're giving us that money and they're saying we're repaying the debt that you bailed us out with. The money you bailed us out with, here, we're giving it back. They're giving us back our own money. We own the company that's making the money. But they're taking it and giving it to us and saying, oh no, we're paying you off now. And there's a big bowl of buzz up in government over it. Do they think we're stupid? You ask me why, more again, why I'm getting into the politics. This is why I want to get in at it. I look again for other questions. How will things be different? If we plan for our future, you have to plan under a certain number of rules, and then we can adhere to them as we go along. We all know energy into the future is going to be a huge requirement. We've learned in the last 2 months in Ireland how vulnerable we are with regard to the natural resource of water. Right? Now you can say back to me, and I can't argue, but I can talk about a different way of doing it. they're trying to privatize the water. I don't agree that government can put tenders out for privatization of services where competition can be brought to bear. I don't see at the moment where competition can be brought to bear on the Irish water. So what I'm going to say to you is I'm going to leave that until I see that. But right now, we'll remain with the status quo. I'd love to see more concentration on repairing the leaks that are in the system. Think about this for a minute. No money has been spent on the water infrastructure of this country in the last 40 years. Now, what mentality was in government to allow that to happen? Forget about everything else. Can that mentality be the same mentality that we put in to solve the problem that we have now? Now, I would say no. You can't put the person who caused the problem in to fix and show the solution, because they'll be wanting to take the blame off themselves, and as a consequence the solution will be compromised from day one, and it will break down, it will fragment and break down the road. And how many times do you see that? We have really significant problems. How are we going to plan forward for our health services? I remember a few years ago, just, you'll forgive me for this, I was doing a master's and we were asked in the business, Alzheimer's is getting more prevalent, and a business degree I was doing, and we were asked how would we go about solving the problems and making it sustainable and make money at the same time. And one of the suggestions I came up with, and no one kind of saw eye to eye with me for a while, was people should invest in companies that make fencing. Now, everyone was kind of concentrating on the disease and all that. Fine, there was enough concentrating on the disease. I concentrated on other aspects of it. But that's what I am. You have to think of me saying these things to you, because that's who I am. Then you can make your opinion of me. Money we spend now on preparing for the future will be cheaper than money we'll spend in 10 years at the future when the problem is there. We've got to put in the infrastructure here from an energy point of view, apart from the wind turbines and the wave units, as I see, for commercial use. We have to put in photovoltaics on our roof for domestic use. And we can reduce the dependence on oil coming in. Let's put in our rail or electric rail systems. And this is money that the people of Ireland can get together and spend on and get the returns, and the money is not going anywhere, it's staying inside with us. We have our systems, and they can become spectacular tourist attractions. I was talking today about tourism a bit, and I see Midland Radio were up, or not Midland, was a chance I remember one of them was up talking about some expert was saying we should take some of the tourists who are going on to the Atlantic Way. Now, I don't disagree with that, other attractions here, but as I said, there's scenery everywhere. We have a certain, two of the counties in the constituency of Longford Westmeath border Loughrea. You've got Leitrim, you've got Roscommon. Now, why they can't get together and put a cable car network around the lake, and some of the cars can carry, you can have something to eat on board as you go around, and there can be a stop off at different bed and breakfasts or different hotels in the area, but there's a continuous circular motion around the lake. If that's not a good tourist attraction, that's not in any of the rule books anywhere else, I don't know what is. But these are the things we've got to start considering. Tourists is would be a big money earner for this country. Now, where is the future? We have FinTech, that's short for financial technology. That's on us now. Has been for a while. The first initial move into that type of stuff, believe it or not, was an abacus all those years ago. And jump forward, you have the hole in the wall. But now is different. Now you can do everything on your mobile unit, your telephone. You don't need these big banking corporations. And incidentally, in case this is news to anyone, banks are preparing at the moment across the world, in this country, England, France, the United States, China, Japan, Australia, they're preparing to lay off employees of the bank in their hundreds of thousands because the technology is moving in to replace them. Now, we have to start looking at ourselves and saying, where are the employment prospects for the future in this country? And this steps in education, training. Now, if you at the moment look at, we have DIY places for a lot of lads who were in the trades came under a bit of pressure because people could go in and buy certain things in these DIY stores and kind of become plumbers overnight or carpenters overnight. And they were getting away with it. But then everyone started to learn, and they're learning at the moment that there's no substitute for quality. And the major companies of the world, believe it or not, are not looking for cheap labour. They're looking for quality labour. They're looking for versatile labour. They're looking for well-trained people. And we can do that here. Now, in fairness, we are doing it, but we're not concentrating enough on it, in my opinion. Not when we see what's happening around the corner. I don't want to be playing catch-up. I want every country, every company in the world, when they're looking for that place to come, it's Ireland they're coming to. Apart from the fresh climate we have, which takes care of a lot of their refrigeration requirements for big electronic equipment and stuff like that. We are good infrastructure. We speak the business language of the world. I want us retrain. Your education is a continuous, all the time with you. Even people who are in jobs at the moment, the job for life is gone. You can never depend unless you're working for yourself and that's your job every morning. You're working for yourself. Tell me anybody out there that's self-employed or has been for the number of years that your job doesn't change on a daily basis, or you're thinking that you'll do something that earns money for your house. That's where we have to go. We've got to start thinking about this. We talk a little bit about, and I come back to it at a later stage. I'm giving you a brief on myself and this and politics. We call it social welfare here. We cannot continue to have a situation where we have people who are out of work, who have very little education, saying, oh, I won't take that job today. I won't take that job because I lose this. Right? And you can't blame them because it was set up for them. They're only doing what was expected. But when you talked about what was happening, you were told to stay quiet. What we need to do there is start saying, okay, you need to be retrained. Part of your responsibility for getting help from the state is the help is a hand up. We've got to rid ourselves of the thinking handout. We've got to take people who are currently living in what I call learned helplessness. The people who have learned to live on the social welfare payment and the system are associated with social welfare. No. Under me, no. I will be working to dismantle that. About people going back into education at night time. We have wonderful educational facilities. Some of them closed down at 4:30 or whatever. No, I want them left open at night time for people to go in. And the only way we're going to do that is by letting people who are currently on this system know that as things progress, they're not progressing for you unless you're getting into the system that helps that progression for you and your family as well. Now, one of the questions, and I talk about it on the first video I made, is having reasonable economic wealth in the nation. How do we go about transferring that, converting it from economic wealth of the nation to the well-being of the nation? Okay? The conduit for that is, the big part is the civil service. And in my opinion, looking at the situation, having one or two experiences of it over the years, it's blocked up. It's blocked up with confirmation bias. It's blocked up with people not wanting to work. Now, anytime anyone criticizes this, you have, oh, we're the best workers in the world at this. If that was the case, we wouldn't be seeing all the self-help units that are up in this country. For me, they are manifestations of an underlying problem that the public service is not doing their job. Now, for me, I would be looking to put contractors, put consultant contractors into management position in a strategic way that will show how better work practices have to be introduced. You know, we're in the civil service, and I'm open to correction here. Show me the communication protocols. If you do, I won't talk about them. I don't think they exist. Right? So they will introduce them. They will be free of government influence, because the way I was structured is I would tender to the management companies. They would come in. They would invoice us for their people. But they would give the results, and they would set the different dashboards in place where we can monitor what's going on. A person's job is a person's job. Great. We're not slave drivers, but you have to do your job. And the first thing about that is, what is it? You ask anyone working in the civil service, give us a look at your job description, and all you'll see is dust. And maybe an approach from a representative at a later stage. This has to stop. Now, it may turn out that you say, no, we lived, well, that's okay. That's your prerogative. As you're voting, you can say no to me. But you'll be back in 5 years' time with bigger complaints and the country in a worse state, unless we start to do something about this. The biggest thing we can do, we must remove tenure from the civil service. And that means that the job for life is gone. I mentioned this a week or two ago, and there was a chap who'd retired from the civil service, and immediately he came back to me and he said, well, if that's the case, I'm not arguing with you. He said, well, we want an increase in remuneration to commensurate with what's happening in the private sector. And my answer to him was, great. Great. Let's see the productivity. Let's clean out these arteries. Let's get really efficient conduits so we can transfer the wealth, the economic wealth of the nation to the well-being of the nation. If you think about the number of houses that would start to be built in this country, if you adopt the system I want, where I give you 15 years of your retirement, wait, I give it to you now. The Irish diaspora that's away, all the guys that were out, do you think they don't want to come home here and live in Ireland? Every one of them do. I worked outside of Ireland. I had to travel out of Ireland for employment in all those years. And I did. Didn't complain, I did. But I always wanted to be back. And a lot of the contract work I did allowed me to be back periodically. But there are a lot of guys who weren't getting that opportunity but would love to come home. They will all start to trickle home here. The only stipulation I would put on that is you have to be an Irish citizen. And we can up the ante other than just learning how to sing the national anthem. But this is some of the stuff, that I'm talking about that you will get from me. I won't compromise on this because we're only walking ourselves into trouble unless we start taking responsibility for our lives into the future. I know it's not going to be, who said it's going to be easy? But if we're all doing it, it's certainly not going to be too difficult. And we're all putting our fair share in, we're all getting reasonable return, we're all living, no one wants to cut anybody's throat. The slaggers will soon stand out. We've got research that says in big bureaucracies like the civil service, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. People have tried to disprove that for years without success. Major companies use that. We can go into that at a later stage. But these are the things that we need to shake that little bit. Bring in different work practice. Take the personalities away from. Now you can do that, as I'm suggesting, by bringing in the outside contractors and then they're gone. And we're in a different work environment. It would be very easy to do that with everyone agreeing that the best way forward is together. But you're always going to get that special interest group that say, no, I want grants. I want, they give sporting grants out. I couldn't believe it. There was local politicians were getting up on the social media a few weeks ago saying, oh, I worked hard to get you those sporting grants. There are children with scoliosis lying in couches and broken beds at home who can't get operated on. But we have money for sporting grants. Think about that. Now, maybe it doesn't bother you the way it bothers me. We have charity donation. The money is filtered into a charity in an offshore position, which is rerouted into the bank account in another offshore position for the guy making the contribution on behalf of the company. They're getting tax relief here and the money is going into personal account elsewhere. Now, if that's something that you want to continue with, then say no to me. But I guarantee you, saying yes to me will rid this country of this. I won't tolerate it for a second. No. I see other question coming in. Every Friday night from now on, unless, of course, I'll let you know in plenty of time, I'm on vacation or something happens, I'll be on this AMA time from 7:30. I'm glad I got the opportunity to start off tonight. This will be rerunning on my website. You can see it for as long as you like. But I'll be back next Friday night at 7:30. And again, I'll answer the question. Now, as we go on, I can be more precise with the answer for the question the more you get to know me. I have to spend a bit of time with you now, allowing you to get to know me through the questions you ask and the way a few of you might say, and maybe rightly so, you rabbit on a bit. So you have to get to know me, right? So, but I don't like unfairness. I don't like people having an unfair advantage because they know a politician. I don't like a politician that will make sure one person jumps a queue for a house or sickness, with no regard in a zero-sum game for the person that's getting knocked off. Now, vote for someone else if you want that to continue. But if you want to put a stop to it, put me in. And I'll get other guys with me in from different parts of the country, and we will put a stop to this. There's lots of people out there that want to stop this on your behalf and make this country more effective and efficient, and make that conduit that brings that economic success into the well-being of the nation. So for now, I'll leave you. And you know I'm on Facebook, you know I'm on Twitter, you can get me anytime like that. We'll have our arguments as well. But until next Friday night, thanks for joining me. And I hope I've given you some insight into who I am. Thanks.